My TikTok live today, I didn't have a moderator and I went kind of viral. So I had quite a few trolls. So I was dealing with them almost the entire time. So rather than having to edit that video, I'm just going to post this short video here, kind of summarizing what I was talking about today, which is getting real and honest with yourself in order to manifest. So here's why it's important. So getting real is just means like seeing yourself accurately, seeing yourself as who you really are, the complete version of you, the parts of you that you like and the parts of you that you don't really like. Because when you don't see the entirety of who you are, you're not going to be able to make changes in those areas. So when you think about it, our ego, the parts of us that have this idea of who we are, our ego loves to pretend the parts of us we don't like don't exist, right? The parts maybe that we do in secret, the parts that we do that are based on habits or addictions. Our ego wants to make excuses for those parts, downplay those parts, pretend they don't even exist, right? A good example would be, and I mentioned this on my live, and this actually relates to one of the trolls that came on, is if you spend a lot of your day, for example, under an anonymous account, like criticizing people or trolling people or getting on all kinds of arguments and calling people names, that's a great example of a part of you that you probably aren't being honest about, right? When you describe yourself, you probably don't describe yourself as, like, let's say, a doom scroller, a comment arguer, right? Or a yelling parent, whatever it is. I'm not saying this to judge at all, because we all have these parts of us. But when we think of who we are, we often exclude those parts of us, right? But that's where the actual real change is going to happen. Because if you spend hours a day arguing with people on the internet and calling them names, that could be one of the reasons why you're not making it big with your business. Because if you have 3 hours a day to do that, you're not spending that time doing something else. Or it could be maybe why you're not in a relationship, right? If you're spending a lot of time stirring up trouble, creating drama, saying things to people that are really unkind and highly unattractive, that could be why you're not manifesting a great relationship. That's why getting real is so important, because you have to start to see those parts of you that you don't like, because those are the parts that are probably hindering your manifestation. So let's talk about how to do that. So one way to do that is look at the areas in your life where you're making excuses. Okay? Like, excuses are often cover-ups that we make for things that we don't want to admit, right? Like, a good excuse might be, I'm fine. That didn't bother me. That's an example of that. Like, that's an excuse so you don't have to admit that maybe something did bother you. So let's say you're in a relationship and your partner bothers you a lot or mistreats you. And you always tell people, I'm fine. Or you tell yourself, I'm fine. It's not a big deal. Well, what if it is a big deal? What if being in a relationship with this person that hurts you all the time is actually a big deal? Imagine if instead of saying the excuse that you're fine or that it's not a big deal, you actually came to terms with the fact that it is a big deal and it does hurt you when your partner talks about this. Now, the biblical term when St. Paul was on the road to Damascus was that the scales fell off his eyes, right? And he saw the truth of who Jesus was. Now, I'm not getting religious here, but that's just an example of the metaphor of scales falling off your eyes. When you start to get real and recognize that a lot of your excuses are just cover-ups for things you don't want to admit, the scales will fall off your eyes. For example, you may say that the job, you don't mind your job. It's not that big of a deal. You're okay with it. But maybe if you admit that you actually hate your job and you don't like it and the career path you're on makes you miserable, coming to terms with that could change your life, right? Because you might spend 8 hours a day and 2 hours driving, so 10 hours total, giving your energy to that job. Now, if you can admit that you don't like that job and that job is not doing it for you, and maybe you chose that job because your parents pressured you, think about what getting real in that case could do to your life and also your manifestation abilities. Now, the second way to get real is to, when someone speaks the truth, to at least acknowledge that, if it's true. Now, here's what I mean by this. So if someone, for example, let's say you are trying to lose weight, and you even tell your friends, I want to lose weight. You're always talking about how you want to lose weight, but you never really follow through with it. And every time your friends point it out, they were like, well, I thought you said you wanted to eat better right now. Instead of immediately going into denial and getting angry at them and lashing out at them, maybe accept that what they're saying is true, that it is true, that you said you wanted to lose weight. And it is true that you're not sticking to that right now. Now, I'm not saying judge yourself. You don't want to judge yourself. You don't want to shame yourself. But simply acknowledging that, yes, what they are saying is true. So instead of getting defensive in that moment, you can admit, you're right. I did say that I wanted to lose weight. And I appreciate that you pointed that out. Now, see the difference in the response? Because when you start to acknowledge that, yeah, you did say that you wanted to lose weight, and your friends are actually looking out for you and agreeing with you that making a better food choice is a good idea. Just simply admitting that will change your life. So the second thing I mentioned is just when you hear the truth, acknowledge the truth, accept the truth. Now you can explain why maybe in this instant you are eating in a bad way, or maybe in this instant you are not necessarily going to make the choice that you wish you would make, but accepting the truth will go a long way. Because our ego's first response when we hear something that's truthful but uncomfortable is to deny, make excuses, cover up. And if you know how the brain works, and I talk about this a lot, when you do this, you're just reinforcing that old pattern. You're convincing your brain essentially when you argue against the truth that the untruth is reality. So think about the time and energy and the emotional intensity and time that you're spending arguing against the very thing that you said you want to do when you argue against someone who's telling you that, yeah, didn't you say you wanted to eat better, right? So you've just maybe given 2 minutes or more, maybe longer, 2 minutes of emotional intensity and explain the reasoning behind why you're not doing the very thing that you want to do. So these are just 2 ways to get real and come to terms with the parts of you that maybe you don't want to admit, but once you acknowledge those parts, I promise you, your life will change. Because once you start to acknowledge them, then you are free to work on them. Then you are free to change them. Then you are free to deal with them. And once you know this, then you can start to create the new version of you.